Mike Hayes, Global Head of Climate and Renewables at KPMG. Thank you for joining us on AnewZ. Now, busy time here for politicians, but also for business. What are the burning issues for business that are being dealt with here at COP29?
Hi Guy, delighted to be here to talk about COP29, and particularly from a business perspective. I remember older COPs where business really didn't turn up. Glasgow was the game changer when business really started to turn up. And since then, this has become an important event for business. I would define the burning issue for business as being one very simple thing. It's the immense challenge that business is under today to meet the vast array of reporting requirements, number one. But even more than that, how to actually decarbonise their business. We're here at COP talking about decarbonisation and the need to speed up and accelerate, and you see the word accelerate everywhere. The reality, Guy, is very simple, and the message from business is very simple. We're on board with this agenda. We want to be part of it, but by God, it's tough. There are a lot of challenges, and business is here to say, please understand just how difficult it is. It's one thing to state an ambition. It's a completely different thing to actually implement the type of solutions, while at the same time you're satisfying the various reporting requirements. In Europe we've got CSRD, we've got SEC rules in the US, we've got ISSB. I mean, it just doesn't stop. So my biggest concern, Guy, and we can talk about it a bit more, I'm concerned that business is reaching a point where it's going to say, stop, this is too much.
I mean, how on earth does a business figure out whose responsibility it is to report different aspects? Because of course value chains now are so interconnected, aren't they? It must be a nightmare for regulators to figure out.
Well, it's a nightmare for regulators, but from a business perspective, you've got to think about the reporting requirements, but you've also got to think about a couple of other key stakeholders, Guy, which are important in this discussion. They have to think about their customers. Their customers are increasingly demanding that they produce greener products and services, and that is putting real pressure on businesses. Secondly, investors themselves are under immense pressure, and in turn, investors are saying, we need to invest green, we need to invest in businesses that are sustainable, or businesses that have a real credible transition plan. So that's a point of pressure. But there's two other ones as well, Guy, I want to mention. One is your peers, your competitors. You need to keep up with your competitors. If they're moving faster than you are in this agenda, that puts pressure on you to do something. And lastly, and one of the ones that people forget about, are employees. Employees are really saying to their employers today, you have to do something. So the reality, Guy, is we've got all of these different stakeholders who are saying to business owners, you've got to do something, and it could be reporting, it could be decarbonisation. Take your point, it could be focusing on your supply chains, which is an immense challenge. This is why, I'm going to keep saying it, I'm concerned.
I mean, it's a really good point you make about the pressure from employees, or the right desire to actually work with staff and employees to make a difference. One of the things we heard from the UN Secretary General earlier today was the research that said that it's not just politicians, it's people, citizens, who are actually demanding that more climate action is taken. So I guess if you're the CEO of a big organisation now, you've got this tremendous pressure from all sides.
Well, you have, but I want to talk about why. Yes, you've got all these pressures, and you've got compliance, you've got decarbonisation, lots of different pressures, Guy. Why? I'm going to give you the very simple answer, and not all businesses realise this yet, is that it's a value proposition. We keep talking about the cost, and the cost is very prohibitive. We keep talking about the risks for businesses. We need to change the narrative to talk about why is this a value proposition. And the reason it's a value proposition is multifaceted and very much depends on your geography and your region. It could be that you're avoiding negative taxes. I'll give you one example if I could. One of the most powerful pieces of legislation that's been introduced is a thing called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism by the EU Commission, which is imposing this very significant additional, call it a tax charge, on goods like steel, iron, aluminium and fertilisers coming into the European Union. It is so material to these businesses that they have no choice but to decarbonise, to alleviate the pressure of this tax. So that for them is a value proposition. In KPMG, we work with many other businesses which actually are starting to identify that the end consumers want a greener product. It is not the same as saying, Guy, that they'll pay more. So this idea of a green premium, we should just leave that to one side for a second. What they're finding is they're increasing their market share. So in other words, yes, it's a monumental effort to take on all the things I've spoken about, but the reason we're doing it is the world is transitioning to a low carbon economy, and there will be winners and losers. And my message is, yes, it's difficult, and we as an organization want to work with our clients as they work through this transition, but there is value in this. The value is being created by the climate crisis, and legislation will help drive businesses in a particular direction as well.
And with so much understandable enthusiasm placed on those businesses that are truly green, if you like, how do we support those businesses that want to make that transition, that have perhaps in the past been reliant on more traditional forms of energy?
Yep. So you're actually, Guy, hitting on one of the single biggest issues that's happening. It's been happening over the last 12 months, but it's very much a highlight here at COP29. It's the concept of transition finance. The focus, and this I can tell you for business, is one of the big themes at COP29, is how do we work with the hard to abate sectors to decarbonise? And the problem, Guy, is there are technology solutions up to a point that are available, up to a point, but even those solutions, I'm thinking of things like green hydrogen, green ammonia, methanol, CCUS, they are incredibly expensive today. So really the challenge is to focus on how do we drive more demand from customers to actually reduce the cost of these technologies, and that in turn will help these businesses to decarbonise.
And Mike, what more can be done in that relationship between governments and businesses? Is there more help? Are there new strategies that could be deployed?
There is. Guy, one of the things that we in KPMG are supporting, and we're actively supporting, and we're engaged with UNDP. Later this week, UNDP are going to launch a new initiative called the PACT initiative. It's called the Partnership for Action on Climate Transition. And its purpose is exactly to address the point you've just raised. Currently, we've got countries who are developing their what we call the third generation NDCs, which is in effect their climate transition plans, even though they don't quite amount to a transition plan. You have corporates doing their own things with their transition plans, and we're saying that's crazy. What we have is a complete misalignment. The corporate world needs to inform the political world what are the policy drivers and the changes that are needed to help them decarbonise. And on the other hand, the governments need to inform business about the actions they need to take to meet the national objectives. So what we're doing in supporting UNDP is trying to create this loop, this positive loop that will actually increase ambition at the national level and at the local corporate level as well. And that is one of the big gaps. So a lot of people say, Guy, this COP is not the big COP, it's next year. We don't have time to wait until next year. That's why this is one of the initiatives that we've latched onto, and I'll talk about another one later on if I could, but this one we think is pretty important and will help to create change.
And of all those initiatives, is it a different focus that's required for giant conglomerates versus small innovative players, or is it, I guess it's not a silver bullet, right?
There is no silver bullet, but again you've hit on another key issue, which is what we call the small and medium-sized enterprises. So there's a lot of incredibly progressive companies addressing climate change around the world. By and large, they tend to be the big public companies or other companies that are driven by some of the big international private equity investors. But Guy, the big problem we have is the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of smaller companies, all of whom sit in the supply chain. And if you sit in the supply chain, it's one thing if you're down at your local supermarket selling ice cream to the kids on the street, but if you're producing anything that you're selling into the market, you're in somebody's supply chain, and the decarbonisation pressures are coming at you through that supply chain. So we have a real issue at the moment. I was talking earlier about the pressure on the big corporations. The pressure on the small and medium-sized enterprises is immense, to a point where if we're not careful, we'll put them out of existence. And even more so, Guy, I'm talking about the small and medium-sized enterprises that sit in emerging markets. I think we need to have a new sense of toleration and understanding of what's required of these enterprises. And that is actually one of the topical issues that's been discussed here. There is no magic bullet to this. We have to pull back a little bit on the pressures that these organisations are facing.
Well, a lot of the CEOs of these organisations are, frankly, your clients. I mean, what do they tell you? Are they hopeful? How do they feel at the moment?
Well, I'm going to tell you how they feel. I'm going to be very honest. They actually, a lot of them don't know which way to go. And I'll tell you why, Guy. The corporate world gets a lot of criticism, but there are companies that are doing amazing, amazing things. They're doing it in their own business, with their own operations, and they're doing it with their supply chains. I have seen companies provide finance to support new agricultural practices, regenerative agriculture in Africa, and it's mind-blowing what's going on. It's super.